What happens when the pillars of a historic team begin to shake? And what if, in the cold silence of an empty locker room, a new era is being drawn, without the faces fans know best? The Toronto Maple Leaf season ended like so many others, with frustration, unfulfilled expectations, and a city in silence. But what came after was different. For the first time in a long while, the words from the front office didn't sound like an attempt to soften the pain. On the contrary, they sounded like a rupture. On Thursday morning, Leafs general manager Brad Treliving stepped up to the podium before the press. What was expected to be a standard speech turned into a direct warning. With the calmness of someone who understands the weight he carries, Treliving stated that there's no guarantee that Mitch, Marner, or John Tavares will even receive a formal contract extension offer. If you follow the Leafs, you know what that means. This isn't just another offseason. It's a dividing line, the end of a cycle, or perhaps the start of a radically different one. But before we dive in, take a second to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Here, we don't wait for rumors to heat up. We analyze them before they make headlines. Join the community that breathes Leafs like you and is never caught off guard. Back to Treliving. He began his press conference with a season retrospective, reaching back to last summer, when he hired Craig Berube as the new head coach. After that, he talked about changes on defense, goaltending issues, and the regular season campaign. But when it came to discussing the playoff elimination, the tone shifted. He didn't hide his disappointment. He got straight to the point. Despite still playing at a high level, it didn't deliver on his promises. And because of that, a DNA change was underway. That was the phrase he used. And from that moment on, everything became clear. No one was safe. That expression, change of DNA, ignited Leafs Nation. Because this isn't about tweaking a few pieces, swapping goalies, or adjusting the third line. It's about changing the core of the team. And for many, Marner and Tavares are that core. The lack of guarantees regarding their futures wasn't an oversight. It was a statement. According to Treliving, the decision will be made based on internal review currently underway and ongoing conversations with both players' agents. The time for emotional decisions is over. What comes next will be cold, rational, and possibly irreversible. John Tavares spoke out the previous week during the famous locker cleanout day. As he exited, he talked to the media and mentioned that there had been early discussions about a possible extension with the Leafs. He seemed open to staying, but his words, though respectful, were cautious. There were no declarations of eternal love, no promises, just the acknowledgement that the dialogue had started. With Mitch Marner, it was different. He said very little, avoided the topic, but his body language, his evasive eyes, and his roundabout answers to simple questions suggested genuine discomfort. As if he already knew that, come July 1st, everything could change. As if he was aware that his days in Toronto were numbered, even if no one had said it out loud. The symbolism here is impossible to ignore. Marner isn't just a player. He's a hometown kid, drafted in 2015. He grew up wearing the blue and white. He represents the dream of Toronto fans to see a winning team built with local talent. Tavares, on the other hand, was the centerpiece of the bold rebuild that began in 2018, when he left the Islanders to come home. He became captain. He became a symbol. Now both face uncertainty. Craig Berube, the team's new head coach, has also spoken publicly. He said he'd like to have both players next season. That if it were up to him, Marner and Tavares would stay in Toronto. But the final decisions aren't his to make. And he knows that. This restructuring started from the top. The week before Treliving's press conference, Brendan Shanahan, former president and a key figure behind the scenes, was let go. His departure was symbolic and strategic. In his place came MLSE CEO Keith Pelly, a strong name with more corporate, less emotional profile. And the message was clear. The Leafs are under new management, and with it comes a new way of making decisions. It's in this context that Treliving speaks. And in doing so, he planted a seed that could change everything fans have come to know. It's no exaggeration to say this may be the most sensitive offseason of the decade for the Leafs, because for the first time, the untouchable has become negotiable. You have to grasp the impact of that. Even without any official confirmation of departures, the fact that the general manager is refusing to guarantee even a basic contract offered to two of his biggest stars is, in itself, a silent earthquake. And in light of that, the question echoing among fans, in the corridors of Scotiabank Arena, and across every discussion table in the city is, now what? Should the Leafs keep Marner and Tavares, hoping that with Berube in charge, the story will finally change? Or should they follow Treliving's instincts and reshape the roster entirely? Cutting emotional ties in the name of a fresh start? That's the dilemma. And that's what I leave you with today. If you were in Brad Treliving's shoes, what would you do? Would you keep the pillars of the house, trusting there's still gas left in the tank for one last run? Or would you change everything? Knowing you might lose more than just players, you might lose the very identity of the franchise as it is today? Drop a comment below. Let's talk. Every summer, the NHL transforms. The ice melts, but behind the scenes, things heat up. And in Toronto, the heat that radiates isn't just from the weather. It's from uncertainty. The Toronto Maple Leafs' early elimination from the 2025 playoffs wasn't just another stumble. It felt like the end of an era, a warning. And no one made that clearer than Brad Treliving. In a press conference that began as an accountability report and ended as a manifesto for change, the Leafs general manager exposed an uncomfortable truth to the world. The time for promises is over. The team's DNA needs to change, and fast. It was a heavy morning. Treliving walked back through the previous summer, revisiting the decisions that shaped the season, from hiring Craig Berube to the attempts to shore up the defense and goaltending. Everything was laid bare, and in the end, with a firm voice and carefully chosen words, he dropped the bomb. There's no guarantee that Mitch, Marner, or John Tavares will even receive a contract extension offer. Coming from a GM of one of the NHL's most historic franchises, that's no small detail. It's an earthquake. John Tavares had spoken days earlier about preliminary talks to remain in Toronto, but his tone was vague. And Mitch Marner, well, his body language said more than 1,000 words. The winger, once the symbol of the franchise's rebirth, now seems ready to move on, not due to a lack of talent, but perhaps out of fatigue, or because his chapter with the team has reached its end. Craig Berube made it clear he'd like to have both players next season, but he's the head coach. He works with what he's given. And the Leafs front office seems to have a different mindset. Despite still playing at a high level, because reading between the lines represents a short press conference, one thing became crystal clear. Toronto is ready to take risks, ready to leave the past behind, ready to make painful cuts if necessary. And it's in this emotional vacuum that a name surfaces, one that could change everything: Erik Karlsson. If up until now Leafs fans have felt the bitterness of uncertainty, they now feel the chill of anticipation. A new rumor is gaining traction. Toronto may be considering a one-for-one trade to bring Karlsson in. A bold, aggressive move, high risk, but with a potential for high reward. But this story needs to be told clearly. Karlsson isn't just a good defenseman. He's a living legend. A player who redefines what it means to lead a breakout. A maestro with the puck. And even with a $92 million contract on his resume, he remains a valuable asset, especially for a team in desperate need of defensive leadership and creative vision from the back end. The proposed trade, if it happens, will require Toronto to sacrifice something significant. Perhaps a member of the current core. Perhaps a familiar face who's worn the blue and white for years. And that's where the speculation begins. Could Marner be the one? Or Tavares, if renewal talks stall? Or maybe even a strategic piece like Nylander, or a defensive pillar like Morgan Reilly. Such a trade would be more than just a roster adjustment. It would be a public statement that the Toronto Maple Leafs are no longer accepting the always close label, that this team is willing to pay the price to win. Of course, there are risks. The salary cap is already tight, and bringing in Karlsson would demand deep structural adjustments. Team chemistry could be affected. The fan base might split. But no great franchise is built without courage. And NHL history is full of champions who, at some point, made the unpopular move, the difficult trade, the bold decision. Karlsson's arrival wouldn't just change the Leafs' blue line. It would shift the team's entire dynamic. His speed, vision, and leadership experience would be invaluable in the locker room. And beyond that, his presence could inspire a new generation of players to believe that, yes, Toronto can still be a championship team. The question now is, will Brad Treliving have the freedom and support to execute this vision? The split with Brendan Shanahan was the first sign that the power structure in Toronto is being reshaped. Keith Pelly, the new CEO of MLSE, closed last week by stating that changes were coming. Treliving's press conference confirmed it, and the Karlsson rumor may be the first of those big changes already in motion. The situation is clear. Toronto has reached the limit of its patience. The fans are tired of brilliant regular seasons followed by playoff collapses. Management knows this, and this might be the turning point. But now, the question for you, the fan, is simple. Would you give up one of the franchise's most familiar faces to see Karlsson at the Air Canada Centre? Do you believe he's the missing piece to finally break the curse? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Leafs Nation is boiling over, and every voice matters. If you want to follow every step of this transformation in real time, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because in the next video, we'll reveal another veteran name who may be on the front office's radar. A complimentary piece who could arrive with Karlsson or instead of him. Get ready, because the ice in Toronto is about to shake.